with this cord, we can interface with this little computer chip, which acts like a brain, and we can program it to do certain things. Here's the power, and here's the sensor. And basically, we programmed it so that, this is a sensor that takes electrical information, resistance, and turns it into a temperature reading. And then we also, the temperature reading is, being computed on the brain and then output into a rate of flashing for the light. Okay. So if I hit the sensor, right?
So you raise the temperature, it blinks faster.
Basically. And then also if I cool it down.
Oh wow, that's neat.
Yeah.
So explain to Kenny why we care.
I was about to say, what application does this have?
Well, a lot of different things. I mean, one, you could also program it to only turn on at a certain temperature. We're turning this temperature information into light. So you could imagine things like having a fever, a thermometer that turns on if you have a fever, or if you're monitoring the outfall of some industrial discharge. A lot of times heat is a form of pollution, where they're getting rid of their treated water, but it's a different temperature than the natural river, or than the natural temperature of the river, and that will affect creatures in the river. So you could use it to detect heat pollution. We've also thought about connecting a little speaker, and maybe that's what because Don's done that before, so that it could sing based on temperature, or sing if it goes past a certain threshold, and could indicate to you something. What I really want to do is make a sensor that indicates depth. So now that we have this system that can take electricity, turn it into information, and then take that information and turn it into something that you could just naturally, right? Because if we hook this up to the computer, it could give you a bunch of numbers, and that's cool. But now this is like on a live basis, like interpreting those numbers, and then we could teach it how to flash too, or we could teach it how to sing too, so that you don't have to have the numbers to understand what's going on in the water. And there's a lot of a lot of people in New Orleans want to know what the water table is doing, because we're kind of in this situation where we're sinking a lot. And we're sinking a lot because we're pumping out the water all the time, because we're kind of a bowl, right? But it's not really measured. The management of those pumps is just done on kind of a equational basis. Like, they know it's going to rain so much, so they pump it, and they pump everything dry, which means they over pump. But we have wetland soils, right? Really squishy soils. So when they over pump, they take the water out from under the city, which causes us to sink a little bit more. So there's a thought if we could measure the water table and have it pump with more precision, we would slow down the rate at which the city is sinking, which would save us in the long run, because you got sinking, you got pipes messing up, and you got all kind of stuff messing up. Also, one of the biggest expenditures New Orleans has is pumping. Because pumping water, that's a big old diesel.
Yeah.
Big old diesel pump, right? It's a big old engine. Diesel fuel is expensive. Diesel fuel is dirty. So there's air pollution problems. And then there's the other thought that instead of just pumping all of the water out, we actually need to retain the water in the ground, and that'll help keep New Orleans floating and not sinking. So there's these architects behind the urban water plan that want to take streets and make them more water friendly, or take the canals and increase their capacity so that so that it'll slow down the water. We aren't just catching rain and pumping it out. It'll catch it, detain it in the groundwater, and then the thought is, if you slow it down, then you don't have to pump as much. If that, I don't know if that.
No, that makes complete sense.
Because there's a total difference between, we only have a system that has like this much capacity, and that better not overflow, so we better get out the water while we can, or a system that has this much capacity. It's like, and then you gotta wait. You can wait till that fills up if you have a system with more capacity. It's like, we don't need to run the pumps as hard or as long because we have this containment system. So that's been the push, to do that on a large scale in the city. But that's not happening yet. But there are these projects that are doing it like on a lot by lot basis, and they want to be able to test whether or not they're rain garden. They build these rain gardens, right, where they're like sunken gardens that when it rains, it holds water, and then allows it to slowly infiltrate, so it doesn't go into the pumping system as fast. And that's also good for pollution too, theoretically. Right? Because if the water slows down, if the water has oil in it and it goes through the soil quickly, then microbes in the soil have more time to eat on it. If it's just a pipe, it goes right through and we pump it right into the lake. And New Orleans we're violating our, our MS4 permit,
our stormwater permit.
We're putting too much dirty water into Lake Pontchartrain. So the hope is these rain gardens can help solve the pumping problem and also the pollution problem. But to build things correctly, they need to be monitored and evaluated. So monitoring the water table is something that we really need to do to make sure these rain gardens are working right. So the thought is we could do this kind of thing, but not only with temperature, but with depth. And this is like a thing we bought that it's basically it's made so that you put it in a barrel of water or something, or like your fuel tank, and as it fills up, it changes the capacitance around these wires. Like it makes the electricity flow more if it has water around it than if it's dry. So based on that, you can take a reading of how much electricity is flowing through the wire and then translate that into depth. So we're trying to make that really cheap, but then also make it really easy. So you could have a device, instead of a temperature sensor, it would have this depth sensor coming out of it, right? And it would have the brain that'd be programmed to blink the light at a certain rate if it was a certain depth. So you could just have the device sitting out there in imagine a rain gauge, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of we were trying to build a rain gauge, but also a rain gauge that goes 2 or 3 feet under the soil. So then you'd have that out, and there'd be holes in it so the groundwater could get in it, So you'd have that out there and have a device on top of it, and it would be recording the depth, a number, right? But then also you'd have a spontaneous, some kind of
alarm or flashing.
Alarm or flash or some kind of interpretation of that number that was live. So you wouldn't need to download the data to know how deep the water is. You could just look at the blinking light and figure it out. If that makes any sense.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, because to hook it up to a monitor, it's going to be hard. It's going to give you. We could probably program it just to give us depth, but the light's a little bit more interpretive and a little bit simple. And the whole idea is to make a really easy to use, inexpensive water data collector.
And who would use this data? I'm curious.
Well,
I'm sure it has a lot of applications. I'm just curious,
well, right now,
is it specific to
that are building? Right now, I have it in my mind. People that are building out these pilot rain gardens to show that slowing water down for New Orleans is a good thing, and that they could you can have an effective water detention system, but with these rain gardens. But to do that, they have to measure. They have to go out and measure the water table over time and through a rain, if that makes any sense. So you kind of want to install one of these water table depth sensors for like 2 weeks. You'd want one in a place where you have the rain garden and one where you don't. And so like they want to show that it's slowing down the water. So if you had more depth for longer in the rain garden, that would be evidence that it's working. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Where it wouldn't, you would get, the rain would come, it would fill up, but then it would rapidly go away. Whereas with a rain garden, it should fill up and then stay there for a while and then slowly go away. So
this seems like it would also have like some agricultural.
Oh yeah,
kinda.
Yeah, sure. Sure, but I'm not one. I'm not.
No, I was just trying to think like in the many different aspects. I mean, a hammer is only a hammer depending on who you give it to.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think this device was like made for farmers. Farmers got to do a lot of stuff. So there's lots of like fishermen need to do a lot of stuff, and they need to know all of these different things. So I mean, I'm just not a farmer, so I can't really speak to like what.
Oh no, I was just thinking that it's cool that you're building an instrument that